All right. So we did components of blood. Okay. Now we understand that we have to make new red blood cells like on a continual basis. We want to think about how we're going to do this. And instead of like drawing it, I'm just going to kind of make a flow chart, I think. I'm just going to see about making a flow chart really instead of like this teeter-totter thing a little bit. So making new erythrocytes or new red blood cells is actually a homeostatic mechanism. And that homeostatic mechanism always has to start with a stimulus, okay? This is new, so I'm hoping this is going to work out. I'm going to go that way. So one, we're going to have a stimulus. That stimulus is basically going to end up being oxygen levels. So we're going to have like normal oxygen levels. And when oxygen levels are too low, that usually indicates either you're not breathing, so breathe, or you're going to have low red blood cell count. You're going to have low hemoglobin. And technically, right, hemoglobin is found on red blood cells. So if you have low red blood cells, you should have a low hemoglobin level. If you have a low hemoglobin level, you have low red blood cell count probably. Okay, so you might want to think about the reason why this stimulus is occurring. There are a couple reasons. One, again, you're not breathing, but that's not long-term stimulus. Like if you're not breathing, you're not going to kick in producing new red blood cells. Your brain's going to tell you to breathe. If you're having low levels of oxygen continuously and breathing is not helping you, this is when this stimulus kicks in and you're going to try to increase your red blood cell count. Okay. The other thing is like maybe you're bleeding out or maybe you're bleeding. So in some cases, you have patients that have anemia, and that anemia is basically things like a pernicious anemia, where your patient's actually bleeding internally and you might not know that, but they're anemic because they don't have enough red blood cells. Okay, so that stimulus basically is going to be received by a receptor, right? We're going to have a receptor. In this case, the receptors are going to be chemoreceptors in our blood vessels. So we're going to have chemoreceptors for O2 in blood vessels. We'll see this more when we get to blood pressure, or I'm sorry, when we actually talk about respiration, because you do have chemoreceptors for oxygen and you have chemoreceptors for carbon dioxide, and each one of them triggers a different response. So if you have a long-term shortage in oxygen, it's going to trigger the receptor, right? That stimulus is going to be received by the receptor, or I should say monitored by that receptor. And then the receptor is going to have to send information to a control center or an integrator. So in this case, the integrator is the medulla oblongata because it controls oxygen and carbon dioxide levels primarily through breathing. So you're still, there might be other places, but we're going to say medulla oblongata, okay? So in this case, the medulla oblongata checks the O2 level against normal. If you're not within the range, this is when the medulla oblongata has to send its information, sorry about my weird bend, to some effectors. Okay, so if you have low oxygen levels because you're not breathing, the effectors are actually going to be respiratory muscles, and you're going to start breathing again. In this case, though, we're breathing, medulla oblongata is telling us to breathe more, and that's not working. So in this case, our effectors are going to have to be actually blood stem cells. These blood stem cells are found in red marrow. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I totally forgot a step. My effector in this case is the kidney. I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing something wrong. I forgot about erythropoietin. Here, we're going to send a message to the kidney, okay? And the kidney is going to release erythropoietin. I'm just going to abbreviate EPO. Why? I don't want to spell that. Okay. So it's going to release EPO. And basically, EPO should have, like, you should have a response, okay? So you're going to have number 5, and this is going to be a response. That response is going to be that the EPO goes to our blood stem cells. In red marrow. And essentially, you create new red blood cells. So I'm just going to make more red blood cells. And as I make more red blood cells, then my result is going to be this. So number 6 is going to be my result. Okay, so the result is an increase in red blood cells, an increase in hemoglobin. Overall, that increases oxygen levels and turns off my system. So here, this is a negative feedback because it turns off the stimulus. Okay. So I actually killed 2 birds with one stone with this because I actually went through the homeostatic feedback mechanism also and detailed everything out. Perfect. Yay. So that's how you're going to create new red blood cells. Okay. You can create your flow chart in any way you want to. I just made it like this because it's on the fly. So let's see though, like what happens in order to maybe cause this low red blood cell count, right? So you could be bleeding, or maybe it's been way too long since you made new red blood cells and you just got rid of a whole bunch of them. So what happens when we have to get rid of a whole bunch of red blood cells? That's going to be the next part.